Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of A Closer Look. I'm Eleanor, so glad you're here. Okay, so we're going to talk about another kitchen today. This one is by deVOL. And I've never heard that word said out loud, but you can tell me if you have and leave, pronunciation notes uh, in the comments. I did just find out that deVOL is actually an amalgam of the names of the founders who were Philip DeVries and Paul O'Leary. And so they put the DV and the OL, DEV of DeVries and the OL of O'Leary together and came up with deVOL. And that was very clever of them. So they started they started out creating furniture and antiques and restoring antiques. So their particular style is more in the traditional realm. And you'll see that in this particular kitchen. This is actually one corner of the kitchen. This is where we're starting today. And then what we're going to end up looking at, we'll get there eventually. We're just looking at this back side of the kitchen, but this shows what their inspiration is, that they wanted to make it look like a little cafe, a little bar in old Manhattan. And I don't know why they didn't say old Paris, but they didn't. I guess Prince and the Revolution. Anyway, I think they associate this all with a New York look, and that's fine. I don't think I have more design knowledge to counteract that. I just see the French there. So, and it has a Parisian feel, maybe because of the seats. So, but it's cute with the so we're looking at the back of the kitchen and we'll notice there's a hearth there. Lovely. There is this table. And this is very much like little cafe moment next to a window. And it's cool, it's set apart with a little frilly pendant. This is a word choice I borrow from them in their description. This sort of adds to that old-timey feel. A little bit of a feminine touch there too. And here we see one of the main shots of the kitchen. And when we lay out the floor plan of a kitchen, there are a lot of options, but eventually you start to see there's a few shapes. There's like an L shape, there's a U shape, and sometimes there's also the parallel lines. And so what we see here is really the main shape of the kitchen, these long counters. This is the island, and then this is the one that's attached to the wall. And so deVOL kitchens, where they started is kind of not where they started, which was in furniture and furniture restoration, so like let's just take some obvious moments here. These are pieces of furniture that are not attached to anything, right? They float in the room. They rest on the floor, but they can be pushed around, they can be lifted, they can be moved. And when we look at a kitchen, generally we're thinking like this is not furniture so much as it is millwork. It's cupboards, it's shelves and things that are attached and they don't move. And this is really what this kitchen looks like. And these things are resting very heavily on the floor. It would be hard to move this counter to this island. They actually think of their identity as a kitchen supply. It's really cabinetry supply. They actually think of it as furniture kitchen. No, kitchen furniture. Sorry about that. That it is a freestanding kitchen furniture, which is historically what kitchen furniture was. It was built in, everything built in and attached to the wall. That came later. So, you can find in antique stores, you can find old hutches. Hutches were big, that's where you stored everything. An old ice box, that thing actually moved. It was not attached. It wasn't attached to electricity. It wasn't attached to anything. It just sort of sat on the floor you pushed it against the wall. And then there was also, a giant kitchen table, something sturdy that you could work on, that you could knead bread or chop things on. But that was also a movable piece. So here in this kitchen, everything is pretty fixed. But it also has this wonderful traditional quality. So they have brought in some of these older elements, and let's just take a moment and appreciate them. So one thing also, let's like it's a staged interior, so we're not really seeing, you know, a realistic kitchen, you know, store, like what you would store in the cabinets. But these are beautifully designed cabinets with black boxes. They call this the black kitchen, by the way, which is one of the things that really caught my eye. So the box of the cabinet is black, creating wonderful contrast, you know. And then the doors are these, they're clear window panes with these natural, you know, stained wood trim, which looks like they have a rounded edge. Very thin, rounded edge. I've started to see that a little bit more in, you know, more mass market cabinet suppliers are offering a thinner edge. If that looks sort of interesting, you might explore some of those options. Incredible ceiling molding here, just to appreciate that. And the color on the wall is also really nice, especially with the dark of the cabinets. It does have this like wonderful romantic feel to it. And I think that's just comes about by the contrast, the strong contrast, but really also the shadow, the shadowiness. There's a lot of copper in this kitchen. The copper, you know, maybe is not super unusual. Well, you know, often you'll see copper pots, and then to also have a copper range, like that's pretty beautiful. It's really an eye, you know, eye-catching piece. And maybe that was what informed their color choice. Notice that the color is not just on the walls, but it's also been, you know, soaked into the crown molding, and then also it's on the ceiling. So the ceiling does not have a different color. It has the same color, which I think adds to this moodiness. And then if you didn't see it in an earlier shot, there's also the countertop is made of copper, which it took me a minute. I had to actually look it up. It's like, did they really put copper on the countertop? And they really did. So like that's super fancy and good for them. It's amazing. Observe also that it's not all super matchy-matchy, right? We have different kinds of metal. We have brass on the faucets, and we have copper and copper on the hood and on the counter. So it works, you know, it's sort of they have a relationship. All right. So I think we've gone through the whole kitchen here. Did I miss anything? I do like how they lined up the alley that this is, like thinking of it as like between two structures, the alley of the kitchen lines up with the light of the window. That feels good. The feel makes it feel open. There's not a ton of stuff on the wall besides this one wall cabinet. So if we go back to the picture of the back of the kitchen, yeah. And also this is an interesting detail to appreciate. If we've done kitchen design, the end of these wall cabinets, this isn't often like a little, can be a tricky area. So they like, how do you meet the edge of the wall cabinet to your range hood? Usually people try to merge them somehow. And this brings in questions of like, oh, then do you take the cabinet all the way to the ceiling? Or does the range hood actually go through the wall instead of up through the floor and then out? So, you know, that is one of those details that we take time to work out. And then instead, what they've done is they've just cut it off and left a gap. And, you know, when you end a cabinet run like that, you have to make a decision about what's going to appear on the end. Is it going to be more wood, like the frame? Well, what they decided actually was more glass. So a lovely choice also, especially because you can, you know, at this angle, you can see the light coming through it, giving it more of that delicate, translucent quality. Appreciating the same material is used for the sink and the countertop. Another light fixture. And then here we are back at the back. And so, yeah, they decided, you know, they have this was probably part of the original architecture. The cabinet here is built in. And then they decided that they were going to let this just be open and not add more storage. And largely that's going to be because I think this image shows it the best. They have a lot of storage underneath. These are pretty big cabinets, and then they have these wall cabinets. Is that enough? Well, maybe you figure out how to make it enough. I don't know if this shows it anywhere else, but I didn't notice it until I read. Yeah, I think this is the only picture that really shows it. They have actually a little brass bar for like a footrest, which is a classic little design detail of a bar. Which reminds me that when you have a stool, if you have a high stool, especially where you're sitting on it and your feet don't touch the floor, you want something for your feet to rest on. It can actually be hard to balance on a stool, especially for older people, to stay perched up high if their feet aren't resting on something. So that bar footrest is a nice detail. All right. I love deVOL. If you haven't visited their website, definitely check it out. There's so many just gorgeous kitchens. I post some of their stuff on Instagram periodically. And then I saw also, since I was just visiting their website, that they have a TV show on the Magnolia Network, which is, I think, an extension. Well, it's related anyway to the whole HGTV thing. I haven't seen it, but it would be another way to appreciate the deVOL phenomenon. Okay, hope you're having a great day and a great rest of your week, and I will see you next time. Bye.